start with one just to get you moving, and it's to Amy, really. And you were distinguishing between the different types of language proficiency, and particularly between the basic interpersonal cognitive skills and the cognitive academic language proficiency, and the difference in being able to communicate in language too, and being able to do mathematics and science in it. I wonder if some of us were thinking that at least it would be good not to undervalue the basic communicative skills, because it's better than nothing. And quite a lot of countries, including some of the more monolingual countries, have this experience when they have long programs of language education and end up when the students seem to be able to do hardly any communication at all. For example, there's an adult course available in Singapore for business Mandarin, for example, and that is not about technical language, it's about communication skills. So maybe some of the basic communication skills are important educationally and socially, as well as the more academic language.
Yes, I guess I'm not, thank you for that question. I guess I'm not saying that one is more important than the other. What I'm saying, it really depends on the goal. If you're saying that I want the students to be able to use English to learn academic subjects, then you've got to help the students to develop the cognitive academic language proficiency. It's the kind of scientific language or the social studies language or mathematics language to talk about mathematics. But if it's not, if it is just for interaction, then BICS is perfectly fine. And what we found was that even at university level, for example, some of our English medium students, when they get to university, they actually have a problem because they can converse with you perfectly, but you ask them to write an essay or academic essay, they're completely lost, or they're not able to do that very well. So I guess it's the goals that's most important.
I would add a few points, and I agree absolutely with what Amy said. One of the big challenges is helping people to unpack the academic language. And in fact, one of the things I've learned over the years is that teachers, even when they speak a language fluently, cannot unpack that language themselves. They speak it fluently, intuitively, and they don't understand how to unpack it. So that's one thing. I think teachers need support in unpacking the language of science, unpacking the language of mathematics, history, etc. Another point in reference to language awareness, I believe that's exceptionally important. However, so is communication awareness, to get out of the pattern of some of the patterns that Amy shared about how a teacher goes eventually into yes-no questions. So that teachers become more aware of dialogic teaching, where we go searching for the answer and building the theory together. And of course, that's often an issue of quality. And I think one of the biggest challenges really is that I think we pretty much can say we know bilingual education works if it's quality, if it's high quality education. And that is where a lot of the investment needs to be made.
Thank you for that. I think it's a very important theme. It's a big if, and it's a question of unpacking what is meant by quality in the different contexts that are represented here. And I think Amy's given us a help in doing that. Now,
yes,
question from Jane, and your microphone is speeding on its way to you.
I have a number of questions.
Thank
The first
you.
one is from Liana in Indonesia. In the multilingual education academic proficiencies, is there any possibility that one of the L2 languages is more dominant than the others?
I'm wondering what that question means, really.
So we'll wait for a response and I'll move on to the next question.
I'm just thinking, I think the question might be asking whether in some of the problems that Amy has described with the academic language is more experienced with some languages as an L2 than with others, perhaps more with Chinese though, with English or with Japanese or Spanish, or if this is a common linguistic issue. I guess that might be one of the questions.
I've asked them to come. Shall I move on to the next question?
Try the next one because I'm finding that one a bit difficult.
This is from David Allen. Here at Amnue Silpa, we are the thinking school, very much engaging the students in independent thought and critical thinking. How can we make learning visible with reference to CIE coursework?
Right, I'm going to rule that one out because it's not really about bilingual education. So we're going through your questions very well. Next one, please.
Sorry about that. What strategy do we apply to teach CLIL in order for the students' learning process challenging? Okay.
Strategies for teaching content and language integrated learning. And
I presume for making the learning process challenging.
Right. Right. I wonder if Amy, is there anything you want to add to what you said about that? In thinking of some of the things you said at the end of your talk in the context of CLIL, and perhaps Peter might want to speak from the European experience then. Are there any particularly effective strategies there that you might want to mention to the group here?
I guess I wouldn't want to say to enumerate what the strategies are. I think it is very important to bear in mind one principle, and that is that when you try to help students to understand a concept through L2, there are two things to bear in mind. First of all, is do not think that by simplifying the language, you're not doing anything about the cognitive side of it, because the two are interrelated. Always ask by changing it, rephrasing it, am I reducing the cognitive challenge? And very often teachers do that unconsciously. They're not even aware this is what they are doing. Second of all, I think that the use of L1 in an L2 classroom has always been considered a no-no. But now, if you look at the more recent research, more and more people are saying, do not actually do that rigidly, because L2 is a resource. And particularly when you are dealing with very difficult concepts, then L2 should be drawn on as a resource for helping students to get over the hurdle. And I think this is the flexibility that I was talking about, that so long as it's not, you know, an L1 taking over L2, if it is a resource just to help students make sense of it, then I think it should be exercised with flexibility. Peter.
Certainly Jim Cummings and others speak about the danger of creating an impoverished learning environment. And Lindholm Leary, to whom Amy referred, also found in her research that students were just as capable of answering cognitively challenging questions as they were answering easy questions. And they're far more likely to be engaged because it's meaningful and it's challenging. It's finding that balance. So high expectations definitely need to be part of the system, but they have to be realistic and there has to be lots of scaffolding. One of the other issues we know that that has a high impact is fostering learner autonomy, which is all about setting, well, it's about many things, but it's about giving more control to students, having them choose some of the activities, knowing what objectives or outcomes they're trying to achieve, measuring progress against them. You mentioned critical thinking. I mean, we need to be thinking critically about language, about content, and about learning skills. Often we don't think about all three. Learning skills is one thing I think is essential. Language learning skills, content learning skills, and learning how to learn. And there's a fair amount of research now telling us that students that are scoring regularly at a very high level on IQ tests, if they have poor learning skills, actually students who have been scoring at an average level on IQ tests but have excellent learning skills can outperform those high IQ students when faced with really challenging problems. So there are numerous bits of a good pedagogy that have tremendous power and influence. And also, Amy mentioned this tendency there was in the past to try to separate the two languages completely. In a sense, it's silly. I understand why we did it, But a judicious use of the first language is definitely, we now, I think a lot of people believe, is a wise way to move forward. Translanguaging is a word I throw out there, a judicious and wise way of, let's say, letting students research in one language, report in the other. There are many, many things we can do. Quality pedagogy can help deliver incredible results. We have case after case where we know in bilingual education, classrooms where good pedagogy has been used, students have been able to achieve a great deal.
Thank you very much. Over here, yes. Sorry, Melvin. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Pang from the Ministry of Education. I'd like to ask both of you to provide your perspectives and some advice. In Singapore, we have quite an established system at the primary and secondary level. So my question is related to the pre-primary, where the government has made an open commitment to improve the quality of preschool education, which is currently all private, doesn't come under the government directly. Now, if we were to design a curriculum to raise the quality of preschool language instruction for both, well, for all the languages, there are 4 official languages, English, Malay, Tamil, and Chinese. How should we prioritize our plans, and that would include everything that I think Peter has mentioned, from planning to materials to teacher training, stakeholder focus, and so on and so forth.
Thank you. The question about preschool education, which is highly relevant in this part of the world. Is there any findings from the work you've been looking at that's relevant there?
I'll defer to you first.
Well, I'd at the moment like to run for the door. It's simply because, as Amy said, everything is context dependent. And so I don't feel that I know enough about the Singaporean situation to actually comment, unless I spend some more time learning about it. But one of the initial thoughts that ran through my mind is that, once again, quality education is quality education. And we make a lot of the wrong assumptions. There are now certain schools where children in preschool and kindergarten are being tested beyond belief, where parents and school parents are insisting that their children get an edge on others, and so these preschools and kindergartens are drilling the students. And one of the things that some of the research that's coming out is showing now is that if you look at those drilling programs compared to play-based programs where good pedagogy is being pushed, the children in the play-based programs are actually performing at a higher rate on those tests. So I think one always has to be careful about what one is doing. And if I think one shouldn't ever sort of fly away with some new trend and be concerned about things getting out of balance. Play-based programs have been around for years. I trust them. I'd think of ways to enhance them. I'd be pushing good pedagogy. Other than that, at the moment, there are so many different contexts based on what little I've read, that certain people are coming from a language group where they are not even, that mother tongue has ceased to be a mother tongue, really, a strong first language in the home. There's so many factors that to give you a simple answer, I think, is almost impossible in the few minutes we have.
I'd like to echo what Peter said. He's very kind. He took the first bite, you know, and gave me a bit of time to think about it. If I were to say anything at all, and I agree with Peter, it's so context dependent, I would say that the development of the mother tongue is very important, because that's, you know, I mean, that's essential to cognitive development. And we also note the fact that in the French immersion program, in the early total immersion, the emphasis was that the child must have L2 support at home. So it's not like, you know, you don't have to develop your L1, you know, you just immerse the child in a second language. So I would say that if we were to help students to develop a bilingual competence, that we have to make sure that they are well supported in both languages. That's the first point. The second point is, I would say that I know for policymakers it's very difficult to allow variation. But I think what these research studies are telling us is variation is very important, because it really depends upon specific contexts. Models which work very well for the top 5% or the top 10% will not work well if it applies to everybody. Okay, so to be able to have this flexibility to try out various models and to see what works best with children of different backgrounds would be important.
I think it would be also important to begin to work with parents. I mean, the Welsh begin before a child is born. You get a package while you're going to the prenatal clinic to get you to reflect on certain points. We know, for instance, that there is a correlation between the number of words a child hears before they go to school and school achievement. We know that engaged reading can compensate for socioeconomic background. So the more parents are aware of the importance to speak with their children, to read to their children, all of these factors can also contribute to learning. So all of the responsibility should not fall simply on the school. It is a whole group of people. It takes a village, after all. It takes the whole community to raise those children.